teams, you would have a few teams that would
sure
have that three. You know, it's the same thing about like picking stocks, right? The idea that like, yeah, you know, if you have all these investors, you're going to have a Warren Buffett just out of sheer chance, not necessarily that like Warren Buffett knows exactly what he's doing. That's the theory, obviously.
But there's also this part of it, Nate, and that is the close games decided by 5 points or less, and every year Denver just plays an enormous amount of them, and I wonder, and they have a really good record in them, and I wonder if there's just something about the style of play, or the character of their star players and their key pieces that sort of lends itself to that style, whereas maybe at Dallas, when they win big, and that's just sort of a character trait of their style of play. So I don't know, I just would think there's at least a little something there that muddies it for how Denver plays, given how consistently they've been in close games over the years, and they've been very good in those.
Yeah, give you those stats. 3.8 more wins than expected last year. Going back to the previous season when they lost on wins more than expected, and then 16-17, this is again all per cleaning the glass. Actually well below where they would have been expected, negative 3.0.
That makes sense, but if you recall that year I think you would throw out, because I don't think Jokic was even starting at the start of that year, so that one may be a little bit noisy, but yeah, certainly. So this makes the third year in a row now for them just being better by at least a game, basically, and then in 2 cases 3 or more games. So I don't know. There's something about how they play that they're very good down the stretch. They seem to execute, and they have a player that is just, I think, very reliable. Not great, not somebody that I think like overcomes giant deficits or this or that, but just a player that if you're in it, you're going to have good looks every time down the court.
Yeah, I mean, and the numbers that he's put up in the clutch this year were really fantastic. So your C plus though, aside from this issue, my personal opinion is that it's probably just lucky. At the 0.8, I wouldn't like put a big number on there. That's probably close enough to average. I mean, your median team is probably, or I shouldn't say that, but like most teams are probably going to be within a couple wins either way. And then I think just 2 years in a row, that's not enough. If it were 4 years in a row, I might feel differently. Like people always said, the 2 teams that really come to mind. And I know we're going on a tangent, but hey, we got time for that at this point. Memphis and Dallas were the teams that really seemed like for years always overperformed their point differential. And for Memphis, the idea was like their defense was so good, they had Tony Allen who could lock down the opponent's best score. And then for Dallas, it was having Dirk, having Rick Carlisle. Interestingly, then Dallas, as soon as they wanted to start taking that trend, switched around. So maybe you could say that it was Rick Carlisle. And then Minnesota for years and years was always like well worse than their point differential, although that was through a number of iterations of the team. So I don't know. I mean, for my personally, I always remember probably the greatest clutch team ever, the 73-win Warriors, and then the next year they add Kevin Durant and they won like a bunch fewer games than expected based on their point differential, and were like blowing every close.
Yeah, again, I want to point though just to the I think it lends itself to something stylistic, because if you look back at just the games played in the clutch, which I know this isn't the best metric, but over the last 2 years, Denver has been in the top 3, I believe, in both, and just in terms of games played, I guess top 4. So they play a lot of these games, and they're winning. Their net rating in both of them is top 10. I think 8 2 years ago, like 2 this year. The thing about it is I think Jokic and Millsap, for all the crap Jokic gets about being a defender, I think he's good at forcing teams into maybe their least favorable shots. Now he doesn't contest those shots very well, and if they do beat him, whatever. But so I think there's this baseline of, okay, in the clutch, you're going to get your B- looks, and the Nuggets offense, it's not at its best as hot as a lot of the good offenses, but I just think you can always get a B+ look. So if your defense can always make things kind of hard and your offense can always make things kind of easy, the extremes aren't so high, so you're not going to have a ton of blowout wins. But if you're in the game in the clutch, I just think you have a bit of an advantage. And I guess to me, that's sort of the character of this team. Their highs are not that high, but they're pretty consistent and they can get really good looks, against almost anybody.
Yeah, I think there's something to that idea too. That the way they play, there's not a lot of just boring ISO ball. They're maybe running closer to their normal offense in the clutch, which
right, exactly.
And Jokic likes to distribute the ball. Yeah, so I'm not dismissing it out of hand. I just think that over time that we've seen some teams do this for a while, and 2 years of this magnitude is not quite enough for me. And the other thing you might say too is the 3-point shooting and that's happened 2 years in a row. Is there something systemic there that's causing them to shoot worse from three? Which I'm not sure that there is either there, because I think the biggest argument that I've seen on that I buy is, well, you're forcing more off the dribble threes than you normally would, and the Nuggets famously give up a lot of threes as well. All right, that's probably enough on that. So take a quick break here, and then we can get back with that. This is good. So we're on pace for about a 2.5-hour podcast based on that. You cool with that? That's fine with the kids.
That should be fine. 2.5 to 5. That's what I blocked out.
Okay, we're back here with Adam Maris. We got sidetracked, but for your C+ grade for this team, what is the reason for that? Why is there any particular individual performances that stand out? Where did you think they were falling short in terms of what you hoped they could be?
So I happen to think that Denver is not quite a contender now. I don't think that's very controversial outside of like the diehard Denver people, but I think they're on the doorstep. And when you're that kind of team, you want to figure out, you want more clarity about what direction you should be headed in. And to me, that there was 2 players that were more important for discovering that than anybody, and that was Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. The first, Jamal Murray, I thought he had a pretty disappointing season. And not disappointing, I think he had an identical season to his previous year, which is at his age, basically his age 22 season, that's a real concern. In fact, if you go back and if you look at his per game numbers and compare them to last year, all the way across the board, every single metric is almost identical to the previous one. And then not just statistically, I think also if you look at, just what did he look like on the court, where was there growth in certain areas, and I just don't know that there was. To me, he's the exact same player he was last year. He's only slightly better than he was 2 seasons ago, and it makes you think, well, maybe this is, more or less the type of player he is. So I thought for him that was a bit concerning, especially given that the Nuggets are committed to him on a max contract. Both the bright spot and sort of one of the reasons they got marked down so low, I think Michael Porter Jr. is an incredible talent. I came into the season with a very open mind on him, and I think for me, I'm already convinced that he has superstar potential, not just star potential, but superstar potential.
This will be an interesting discussion.
I can't wait. But he just didn't get a lot of minutes. And the minutes that he got were incredibly inconsistent. So to me, that was a real...
Was that justified?
I personally don't think so. It's funny, Nate, because he didn't play really until January. It was the end of December that he started to get in the rotation, and only because there were so many injuries. The Nuggets went through a spell, and basically at the end of the calendar year, start of the new year, where they were down 3 starters. It was just Will Barton and Jokic left. And Michael Porter was forced basically to play. And the Nuggets, I think over a 16-game stretch, went 11 and 5, something like that, with Michael Porter basically being the third wheel, as Jokic, Barton, and Michael Porter just carrying the team. And he was phenomenal. I think he's a very, low IQ, as to be expected of a player that missed as much time as he is. Really has a lot to learn in the game, but just his natural ability was just so high that, in my mind, you live with those mistakes, even if it cost you something this year, cost you 3 or 4 wins. The trade-off there was just so incredibly high, and at his best. He was the best player on the court multiple times this season, even when he was playing alongside Jokic and Murray.
So we can talk a little bit more about what we see Porter becoming, but I think my guess would be, and you're on the team more than me, would be that that inexperience almost is the reason why his minutes needed to be kind of held down. They have this deep team. They got to keep everyone happy. He's a rookie, number one, but number two, I'm sure Mike Malone would say, hey, we got to cure all of these bad habits that he has, defensively, or shot selection, or distribution, or whatever you want to look at. in terms of his inexperience, especially on a good team like this, that the only way you're going to teach him, especially because he's a little bit of a reputation for kind of being a hard head in that regard, and that's what people said in the draft process, is that it was all about him, and you would think that he certainly has been humbled somewhat being on this team, and then
one of the main factors in the coaching staff and why he was kept out so much is sort of you only get one opportunity to sort of, once you start giving a player a lot of minutes, it's harder to take them back than it is to just kind of slowly make them earn them. And Malone, that was the line all year, was making him earn. Everybody had to earn their spot, and the few times, and I think he was referencing players like Nurkic and Moutier, two of the failures sort of the Malone-Conley era, saying the times where those guys were just handed the keys. Moutier started game one of his career. It didn't go well. All the players that had to start behind Gary Harris, Jamal Murray, Nikola Jokic, all those guys developed, and it worked out really well. So I think he wanted to take that approach. And then the other side you referenced, the biggest disappointment for Michael Porter, I tried to go into this year with a completely blank slate. Of course, we had talked about him. I knew the reputation, both good and bad, and all these things, but I wanted to just completely go in with a blank slate. And, I was worried about the shot selection. I thought it was fine. The biggest disappointment to me was he sat on the bench all year last year, but apparently did not really learn the playbook or the defensive schemes and terminology and everything else. And to me, that was the other half of it. Part of it was trying to bring him along slowly and let him learn the right way, but the second part was, I think the coaching staff was very disappointed that he was basically starting from scratch, and even halfway through the season he was still screwing up plays that they were calling for him. There was a certain amount of plays they would have for him, like, hey, it's an ISO play, and he would be in the wrong spot, and then you could just see Malone call a fury timeout. So those are the things that I think really just got under Malone's skin and really led to him not playing a lot.
Yeah, so, but you're of the opinion, though, that he still should have played more just to kind of get an idea with what they had. He only played 670 minutes,
It's funny, because I think this is more of a philosophical question about, process versus talent and where that balance is. And for me, I look at him and I say, in my mind, this guy is an incredibly efficient, high-volume scorer. That's just who he is. That's his talent. Super athletic, great rebounder, had this incredible size and length. And I look at him and I go, he falls into 15 points when he plays 20 minutes per game. He just accidentally gets 15 points. And he has all of this upside, and I think, look, there's some players, if they're not that good, that process is more important. But for him, a player like him, in my mind, you need him to pan out if you think that if the Denver Nuggets are ever going to really grow into anything. And you just have, to me, the leash has to just be a lot longer.
Yeah, that makes some sense. I mean, I think there's probably also a component of it too that they need to figure out what they have in Jeremy Grant. I mean, you agree with me, his best position is power forward, right?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, and so they got Paul Millsap, who's still one of the best on-off differential players in the NBA. Missed a bunch of time with that knee injury, and it seems like they want to just kind of hold him down around 25 minutes a game now, just for his own health. But then they traded a first-round pick for Jeremy Grant as well. You mentioned Porter's great potential. What do you see him becoming if he were to evolve into the star that many believe that he can be? What does that player look like?
Yeah, so I'm really obviously high on Jokic, as everybody knows. I'm lower, I think, on most of the other Nuggets players, but MPJ is the other guy that I look at, and I think I'm really, really high on him. So my answers will be pretty out of the box and wide ranging. I think he has a potential just to be a 25 to 30 point per game scorer, a fantastic three-point shooter. I think he'll always have a little bit of gunner in him, but he's less so than I thought. That was a much bigger concern just based on his reputation than what I saw this year. That could change. I think he was trying really hard not to just take a shot every time he touched the ball. So about that, but this year that could change. I think he's trying really hard not. phenomenal scorer, offensive rebounding, super athletic. His footwork is pretty robust. He has a couple moves, but it's one of those things where I just look at him and I go, he's so effective, even against good defenders. I mean, there were games where he got it going where opponents would put their best perimeter defender on him and he would still get by them or shoot over them. So I think he's a guy that's going to be just one of those unguardable scorers, especially when he has it going.
The name that comes to mind for me is a more athletic Rashard Lewis in the best outcome for him. Maybe not amazing putting the ball on the floor, but still a strong.
酸民大集合啊！不要用酸民大集合啊！
Than Lewis, but kind of Lewis played a lot of that ISO game when he was in Seattle. Then he was more of a stretch four, not amazing defender in his Orlando days, but he had Dwight Howard behind him, so that wasn't as much of a problem. And then Carmelo is the other one that comes to mind for me. Again, I'm not saying that he is going to be this, and in fact, I have severe reservations about it, but I think those are the two that kind of come to mind. But your hope would be that he could be a little bit better defensively than those guys. I don't like him that much moving laterally, but he's flashed some rim protection skills. But again, he doesn't seem that predisposed towards defending. I think that's another reason. You mentioned the playbook. I think that's the other, getting through a screen. I don't think he can really defend the three that well. And does he have the toughness to play the four? That's a question. And then the fit next to Jokic defensively, Jokic and Millsap have been so good because Millsap's one of the best defenders at his position. I don't know if Porter is ever going to get to be that type of a level. Has the mentality. I do think he has some tools there. So I think that's what it is. I don't think his passing is ever going to be like a massive asset, but he's just got that ability, that sweet jump shot to take a dribble and just rise up over anybody. And you wonder too. I think this is about Murray as well, whether some more three-point happy overall offensive approach could really boost his efficiency.
Oh, no doubt about that.
Yeah.
A couple more things about MPJ though, because he shot 42% from three, and as you mentioned, I mean, the numbers are going to be tough just because the total volume isn't there. But I buy it. I mean, I've watched the guy shoot in practice. I've watched him shoot in scrimmages and everything else. I mean, that's one piece of his game that I just think would always be there. He's a fantastic three-point shooter, and he's really 6'10", maybe even a little bit taller than that, with a high. He jumps high on his shot and he releases high. He's going to be a guy that can always get that shot off against almost any defender. And then the thing that was a pleasant surprise and why I think he can be an efficient scorer, the offensive rebound, he had a lot of putbacks this year and just second chance points, but he's also a great cutter. Jokic actually called him the best cutter on the team, and of course in a Jokic offense, Jokic is such a good passer to cutters, but in particular to tall cutters. Danilo Gallinari and Wilson Chandler, received that was a big part of the offense back in 2017 was if you just got a half step on the defender, Jokic would throw that sort of fade route to your outside hand, and you didn't have to have a lot of space. You just had to have just enough for that pass to get through, and he's already developed that with Michael Porter, whereas if you have a 6'7" guy guarding him, you're giving up 3 inches of space plus a little athleticism. So a half step, that's a nice little fade pass right at the rim, and he finishes it. So a much better cutter than I was expecting.
Yeah, and you mentioned the offensive rebound. I didn't have it in my head that it was this high at 9% offensive rebounding. Pretty good. Now, one thing that I think is a concern is only 15% free throw rate. And now you might say, hey, like Kevin Durant has talked about this, that if you throw it to me in an ISO and you let me go to work, I've got all these tricks that I can use to get to the foul line. And so he's not, the way that he's scoring, he's still playing a fair amount off of others. You're not necessarily going to draw that many fouls. So it'll be interesting to see whether he can boost that up or not. So I think obviously there are concerns about his health, the back, his knees. That's not. He didn't have the greatest medical reports coming out. There are some concerns about his edge. I think his athleticism, I thought, wasn't still quite where it was before the injuries, but it definitely was continuing to get better throughout the season.
It really peaked in January when he played a lot of minutes, because I'm with you. He was missing, he wasn't getting above the rim on putbacks or different things in December, but by January when he was playing a lot of minutes, his athleticism really popped. But also to your point about injuries, you would expect a guy who missed 2 years and is going up this level to be shy. He kind of throws himself into traffic in a way that constantly scares me.
Well, I mean, that's good. Good that he's hasn't been his desire hasn't been quelled by those. I mean, and I know he was like very exciting to get back out there. Obviously. All right, another quick break here, and we'll continue our meander through in just a second. So, do you feel like he should just be straight up untouchable? Obviously, every team says that about their good young players, but is that your feeling, or would you be willing to move him for not necessarily this specific player, but a player along the lines of like a Drew Holiday sort of player?
I wouldn't for a Drew Holiday, but it's not. It's one of those things where I don't know that that's like bad value. It's just that does Drew Holiday make the Denver Nuggets a contender? I mean, are the Nuggets